Hello, my name's Sally. I'm 37 and this is my story about my recovery from ME chronic fatigue syndrome. I recovered after 5 to 6 months using a protocol that I had designed for myself, and I promised myself when I got better that I'd record a video to put online, because in the first stage of me discovering and having to diagnose myself and having very little help from the NHS, I found a couple of useful videos online, and these helped me with my recovery. So my story last summer, actually I'd had a forewarning of the ME before that I thought was a thyroid related issue that was misdiagnosed. And last summer, after a very stressful period of writing a book and being very overworked, I suddenly crashed, and in the ME chronic fatigue fraternity they call it a crash. I crashed and just couldn't get out of bed. I assumed it was a UTI at the time because I had bladder symptoms, so I had some very strong antibiotics and then again some very strong antibiotics, and this went on for around a month, and I could barely walk more than 10 metres. I had a portfolio of symptoms, and luckily after this month I did my own research and got to the root of the problem, which was the notoriously poorly diagnosed, or a syndrome that's only diagnosed via a process of lengthy deduction, ME chronic fatigue syndrome. I don't know what stage you're in, but I'm here to give you hope that complete recovery is possible within 6 months. After this period, you will always have to look after yourself, but I sincerely hope in my case, and the case of many other people that I've spoken to and have direct contact with, that can be your discrete experience of ME chronic fatigue syndrome. So, first of all, this is only how I recovered from ME chronic fatigue syndrome. It's not necessarily how everyone will, and there are as many methods of recovery as I guess there are cases, because everyone has a very individual portfolio of symptoms and a very individual experience. But just in case this can be of any help to anyone, first of all, first thing I'd say is stay off the doom-mongering websites. So if you, ME Association are quite bad for this because they tell you that most people don't recover. I think it's part of their policy of getting funding or something that they have to say it's a congenital and chronic illness. So stay away from those. Be careful with the NHS. You may be very lucky. My experience with the NHS was that one of the precursors of me getting ill was being misprescribed long-term antibiotics, which you may find too that when you develop ME chronic fatigue syndrome, this is one of the contributory factors. So that this had really undermined my system and led to many of my symptoms, or led to the kind of breaking point that led to ME. So beware of being given antibiotics. Antidepressants you'll probably be given, even if you get to an ME diagnosis. Antidepressants aren't needed because of ME. Depression can come as a result of the debilitation of your quality of life, but ME isn't one of the depression isn't one of the symptoms of ME. So beware of that. There are 2 studies that have been conducted by the NHS that were cheap and they think are beneficial. One is around graded exercise therapy, which doctors will probably suggest to you, and the other was around SSRI antidepressants. Both of these methodologies I'd avoid like the plague, because graded exercise therapy, in the very early stages when you can't move, you don't want to exercise, you want to preserve your energy. So what I did, I stopped. You need to stop. You need to remove all stress from your life, and I mean emotional stress from people. You need to stop work. You'll probably be off work for 6 months. So you need to take that on board. Within 2 months, you might not be housebound if you have my kind of severe crash, and what most people will have as their first, and I hope only, crash. So whatever you can do to say to if you're working a 9 to 5, you tell them, I've got ME, I will get better, but I'm not going to be back within several months, no matter what that takes, because if you try to go back when you feel like you have a little bit more energy, that's when you'll be sick for many years. So stop. Bear in mind that everything has to go in the deep freeze for a while, especially any stressful situations. If you're on antibiotics, come off the antibiotics immediately. Supplementation. I followed a protocol in this book, which was excellent. Beating, I think that's in reverse on the camera, but it's Beating Chronic Fatigue, Your Step-by-Step Guide to Complete Recovery by Dr. Christina Downing-Orr. And she was a medic who herself suffered chronic fatigue syndrome, ME. And she has two methodologies in here. One involves prescription drugs, one involves supplementation. There's a lot of supplementation involved. I end up spending probably around £400-500 on the supplements, but they worked and they worked quickly. And she talks about all of the body systems that are affected by ME, including, your adrenals. There's a test in the book that it recommends for sort of adrenal fatigue, your mitochondria function, so your kind of energy that transfers around the body, your immune system via your gut bacteria. So obviously there's a big part on kickstarting the immune system with supplementation. So it's very interesting on the science behind ME, which is despite what some of the old guard NHS and sort of the medical profession believe, stuff that's inherited from the 80s, has many sort of discernible biological effects from your kind of temperature control. As you'll know, your symptoms may vary wildly, but I had everything from earache in my ears here to racking pains, which is the sort of very early stage, the kind of racking physical pains that are very similar to flu illnesses, and then the inability to walk, the breathlessness, the sort of pains in my lungs, really bad eczema, the bladder symptoms, emotional lability, because the area of your brain that sort of deals with emotions is also tripped, so you'll find you're crying a lot. If you come off antibiotics and go on to probiotics, as I did, you'll get a huge die-off reaction, so you'll have this sort of sickness and also, again, this really emotional outpouring. So whatever your symptoms are, this book will probably help and explain the root causes of these various symptoms and advise the sort of supplementation protocol. If you can't afford those supplements, the ones that I'd say were most useful for me were very high dose vitamin C for rebuilding the adrenals, and I actually bought adrenal glandular supplements that come from bovine adrenals to reboot my adrenals, because the cortisol, years and years of being on constant deadlines had depleted my cortisol. So I'd say that those were the two that really helped. And then, and this had been recommended to me by many friends I had, friends of friends, who seem to have recovered quite quickly from ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. I found something that's in its sort of nascent stages, a form of therapy called reverse therapy. About 8 practitioners around this country. Google it. There's a great practitioner in Durham called Lynn who can do Skype sessions. And it's all about the sort of theory of ME chronic fatigue as being caused by your fight or flight mechanism. So when you get stressed, your sympathetic nervous system is constantly going, which is very sort of common in this world, but it just gets jammed basically. So you get jammed in fight or flight, and your body never gets the chance to go into the parasympathetic nervous system and recover. So it's a very simple methodology. You could probably learn it in one session, but you do need a reverse therapist to teach it to you. And it's all about tapping into what they call your head mind and your body mind. So your head mind is the part of you that's sort of overridden your body for probably years if you've got ME chronic fatigue syndrome. And it said, no, I'll pick up that extra piece of work. No, I'll go to this thing that I don't want to do and I'm tired. And you've overridden your body's demands for all this time with your head mind. And it's about sort of accessing your body mind and accessing that part of you that knows what's best for you. And that's a really quick method of they call it turning down the dial. So they call your symptoms the dial. And you find that you can turn off these symptoms one by one over several weeks to a couple of months by doing this. I would say you need the supplementation first, because there's a base level of recovery your body needs to undertake before it's ready for the reverse therapy. But many people just use a reverse therapy and say it works. And then my last point is slow grading back to work, slow grading back to social life. I was off from, I'd say, totally housebound for 2 months, and then off work for 5 months. I actually rented my flat out and moved up with my mum to sort of reduce stress and have an income. That really worked for me. Being away from the city, I live in London, really worked for me. So whatever you can do, obviously people who have children, it's a very different situation, but do bear in mind you've got to make your life as easy and as stress-free as possible. When people get stuck for 5, 10, 20 years with ME is when they carry on whatever ounce of energy they have. They sort of, I'm going to use this energy today and do this, and then the next day they just have this huge payback and can't get out of bed and can't walk and can't even look in the sunlight. So you've got to go with your body. That's what you've got to do for a few months, and good luck. You will get better. And there's also something called the Chrysalis effect, which is an online support group which may help you. I found it a little bit cheesy for me, but it is very good in terms of they have these meditations and resources for you. I think it costs about £20 a month, but I found that quite useful in very early stages, just having this community of people, mainly kind of middle-aged British women, quite glamorous, who'd all got better, and again are against the ME Association's sort of very doom-mongering viewpoint. And yeah, and I basically treated it as a challenge and a full-time job for several months. So maybe that's, if you have the fortune to be in that position to do it, and yeah, you'll get better. Good luck. Bye.